America could lose the money war without anyone noticing. That's the contradiction at the center of Washington right now. The fight shaking the White House isn't about crypto hype. It's about who controls where money lives next and whether your savings stay inside the system you recognize. Yesterday, senior White House officials sat in a closed-door meeting with crypto executives and bank associations trying to unblock a stalled Senate bill. Publicly, it's framed as regulation. Privately, it's about power. In the Oval Office, the president said, "I'm a big crypto person," then added the line that raised alarms across finance: "If we don't do it, China's going to do it." That wasn't rhetoric. That was a warning. Because this decision doesn't just affect markets. It affects demand for the US dollar, interest rates, and where capital quietly flows next. And here's the part nobody explains on television. The entire future of this fight hinges on one small feature buried inside the bill, and it could flip the system faster than anyone expects. Because the public story only shows half of what's actually happening. Officially, this is about the Clarity Act, a crypto regulation bill stuck in the Senate. Yesterday's White House meeting was meant to break the stalemate. Participants called it constructive, but crypto executives left frustrated, saying banks were slow to engage. That's the surface version. The deeper pattern is more revealing. Every time this debate resurfaces, it's framed as safety versus innovation. But listen closely to what's really being argued. The core dispute isn't whether crypto should exist. It's whether crypto platforms should be allowed to reward customers for holding stable coins. In simple terms, should people be paid to move money out of banks and onto crypto platforms? The president publicly backed the bill and framed it as a race, saying, if the U.S. doesn't act, China will. That framing matters because this isn't being treated as a financial tweak. It's being treated as a strategic vulnerability. So here's the reframing question that changes everything. If this is really about protecting the dollar, why is the fiercest resistance coming from inside the U.S. financial system itself? That question is where the story starts to turn. Here's the strongest claim being made behind closed doors. Stablecoins don't weaken the dollar, they prop it up. That's not speculation. On camera, Coinbase's chief legal officer said this debate is fundamentally about competitiveness and about making sure the US dollar remains the global reserve currency and isn't replaced by a Chinese central bank digital currency. He went further, calling that outcome a disaster for America. What we know from the exchange is concrete. Stablecoins are described as being backed dollar for dollar, mainly by short-term U.S. treasuries. They're not being lent out. They're sitting there, tied directly to the dollar. And the argument is simple. As government debt rises, demand for dollars matters. Stablecoins, according to this view, create new global demand for dollars and help keep borrowing costs lower. Now, notice what wasn't presented. No data showing mass withdrawals from community banks. No evidence of hundreds of billions fleeing deposits. That absence matters. Because when one side warns of catastrophe but can't point to proof, it forces a harder question. Is this really about risk or about who gets to keep control? This is where the story flips, because once you strip away the talking points, the escalation becomes obvious. Banks aren't just worried about stability, they're worried about precedent. For decades, deposits flowed one way. Money went into banks, banks decided how it moved, and regulators built rules around that structure. Now, for the first time, a parallel system is being debated in the open, one where customers can hold digital dollars, earn rewards, and bypass traditional balance sheets entirely. We've seen this moment before, not with crypto, but with online trading, mobile payments, even streaming media. At first, incumbents warn of danger. Then the new model normalizes. And suddenly, what once seemed unthinkable becomes everyday behavior. That's the quiet escalation happening here. A feature that sounds technical, rewards on stable coins, actually normalizes money living outside banks. On camera, bank representatives warn of massive flight of capital. But notice how that language works. It treats customer choice as a threat. And once that framing is accepted, stopping innovation starts to sound like protecting the system. The question isn't whether this change is coming. It's whether it arrives slowly or all at once. The contradiction gets sharper when you look at actions instead of words. Banks argue that rewarding stablecoins would drain deposits and destabilize lending. But in the same breath, crypto executives point to something rarely mentioned on air. Over $3 trillion, by their account, is currently parked at the Federal Reserve, earning nothing and doing nothing. That's not hidden. It was said plainly. Meanwhile, stablecoin deposits are described as being backed one-for-one by short-term U.S. treasuries, not lent out, not leveraged, not fractioned. On camera, the claim is blunt. They are much more secure than a fractionalized system. That line quietly changes how you see the risk debate, because one side is warning about hypothetical future harm, while the other is pointing at a system already carrying structural stress. And here's the part that's hard to unsee once you hear it. Crypto companies are publicly pushing for legislation, federal supervision, and strict oversight, while bank lobbyists are the ones digging in. That reverses the usual script. If regulation is the problem, why are the supposed disruptors asking for it? Once you notice that inversion, the fight stops looking like safety versus chaos and starts looking like control versus competition. Now the pressure starts to stack. While the Senate stalls on clarity, the law already on the books keeps moving. The Genius Act is in force. Under it, stablecoin rewards are legal. That was stated clearly on camera. If clarity fails, nothing pauses. Rewards continue anyway. At the same time, Coinbase is expanding fast. Stock trading launches, prediction markets go live, direct deposit rolls out, and everything Exchange Vision is no longer hypothetical. This isn't a future plan. It's happening in parallel with the regulatory deadlock. Then add the third layer. Federal oversight of crypto spot markets still doesn't exist. Token jurisdiction between regulators remains unclear. And yet, billions keep flowing into the system without those guardrails fully defined. Speed matters here. Legislation lags, markets don't. And once consumers get used to integrated financial platforms that move faster than banks, behavior doesn't reverse easily. That's the loss of control regulators fear most. Not a crash, not fraud headlines, but momentum. Because once this stack is in motion, slowing it down becomes politically and economically painful. And that raises the question nobody wants to answer yet. What happens if this continues? This is where it stops being abstract and starts touching real life. Because this isn't about hedge funds or Silicon Valley insiders. It's about how you interact with money every single day. Direct deposit into a crypto platform, earning rewards on digital dollars, trading stocks, accessing markets, moving value 24/7 without waiting on bank hours or approvals. On camera, the argument is that this gives regular people access to tools once reserved for institutions. But notice the tension. If more people shift even part of their financial life into these platforms, community banks feel it first, especially in rural areas where lending relationships still matter. Critics warn those communities get left behind. Crypto executives respond that they're being engaged for the very first time. Two completely different futures built on the same technology. And this is why the decision matters to you, because you don't get to opt out. Even if you never touch crypto, the system around you changes. Where credit comes from, how fast money moves, who sets the rules. If this feels familiar, like another quiet shift that happened without a vote, say so in the comments. Because once behavior changes at scale, rolling it back isn't a policy choice anymore. It's a reality. To understand why this keeps happening, you have to step back from the noise and look at the mechanism underneath. Systems don't move because of speeches. They move because of incentives. Banks are built on deposits. Crypto platforms are built on access and speed. When customers can earn rewards, move money instantly, and operate outside banking hours, behavior shifts naturally, not ideologically. That's the leverage point. Regulation usually follows stability. But here, stability is being redefined in real time. On one side, you have a system that depends on money staying put. On the other, a system that benefits when money flows. Add geopolitics, and the pressure multiplies. On camera, China's central bank digital currency is described as offering yield, pushing the yuan outward into global trade. That's not theory. That's an incentive strategy. And suddenly, this says less about crypto enthusiasm and more about fear of falling behind. The unsettling insight is this: power doesn't disappear when systems change, it relocates. Whoever controls the rails controls the future choices. And right now, those rails are being quietly redesigned while the public argues about the wrong details. Now look at where this heads next, because the trajectory is already forming. There are two paths, and neither is clean. In the first, the Clarity Act passes. Crypto platforms get federal oversight. Stablecoin rewards are explicitly allowed. Banks adapt, partner, or compete, but the shift becomes officially sanctioned. The U.S. locks in private digital dollars as a counterweight to China's state-backed currency. Momentum accelerates, but under clearer rules. In the second path, clarity stalls or collapses. And here's the twist. The system still moves forward. The Genius Act remains law. Rewards continue. Platforms expand anyway. The difference is fragmentation, legal uncertainty, more power concentrated in fewer players who can afford compliance risk. Neither outcome stops the change. They only shape who benefits from it. And notice the timing pressure. Earnings reports are coming. New products are launching. Capital is already positioning itself. Legislation moves in months. Markets move in days. That gap is where leverage forms. So when people ask what Congress will decide, they're slightly late. The more accurate question is this: by the time lawmakers act, will the decision already have been made by user behavior? Because once millions of people quietly adjust how they hold and move money, policy doesn't lead anymore. It reacts. Here's the insight that ties all of this together. This was never really about crypto. It was about whether money remains something institutions store or something people actively control. The Clarity Act didn't create that shift. It exposed it. The real story is that while lawmakers argue over wording, behavior is already changing. Digital dollars backed by treasuries, platforms offering integrated finance, a global race where China is openly building state-backed alternatives, and the U.S. is debating whether to let private systems compete. Reframe the entire debate in one sentence, and it sounds different. This isn't banks versus crypto. It's speed versus inertia, and speed usually wins. The next phase won't announce itself with a crisis. It'll arrive quietly through defaults, habits, and convenience. Most people won't notice the switch until it's already normal. That's why this moment matters. Not because of one bill, but because it reveals who sets the rules when technology moves faster than politics. And the next move is already forming. Who controls rewards? Who controls access? And who gets left reacting? If you want to understand where this goes next and what layer is coming after this one, follow and stay here. This story isn't ending. It's just changing shape.